Well, a quick look at the Asian markets, and they're doing fairly well in today's trading session, trading in the positive territory, coming in on account of a strong handover coming in from Wall Street. Remember, the sentiment has been boosted by some reports of a positive breakthrough on trade negotiations between US and China. So resumption of trade talks is aiding sentiment across the Wall Street, and that has percolated down to the Asian markets as well. Nikkei gaining on account of some weakening in the yen as well, so that is the outperformer in the Asian market. So the Nikkei higher by about 0.6%, dollar yen closer to the 111 handle. The Korean index though lower on account of a couple of these chip makers which are weighing in on the index. A few of the auto stocks not doing too well as well, but no such troubles for Straits as well as Taiwanese indices, both of them sitting pretty in green. However, for the SGX Nifty, it'll be very interesting to see how we pan out given the sort of sharp rally that we've seen in the March series. We kickstart the April series. The SGX Nifty indicates a mild mutinying in terms of the start. Let's see how that pans out.
All right, let's talk about the US markets then. Wall Street ended higher following reports that the US and China have made progress towards a trade deal. The Dow Jones rose 90 points, S&P 500 gained 0.4%, and the Nasdaq Composite ended with 25 points gain. In terms of data, US economy grew by 2.2% in the fourth quarter. This is below 2.6% pace estimated in February. CNBC's Julia Boston gets us a wrap of all the action on Wall Street.
U.S. stocks finishing the day in positive territory, the Dow gaining 91 points while the S&P added 10 points. The Nasdaq is higher by 25 points. Facebook coming under fire again. The Department of Housing and Urban Development charging the social media platform with housing discrimination related to advertising practices. The lawsuit seeking damages for those harmed by Facebook's policies, which up until recently allowed advertisers to target audiences based on race, ethnicity, and gender. On the eve of Lyft's public debut, Berkshire Hathaway CEO Warren Buffett telling CNBC he has not purchased a company's stock through an initial public offering since 1955. The Oracle of Omaha warning that average investors should stay away from hot IPOs. When asked about Lyft specifically, Buffett says he does not understand why anyone would buy Lyft when there are plenty of other companies that are more profitable. And come May 1st, you will no longer be able to smoke or vape inside any of Disney's U.S. theme parks. Designated smoking areas will only be accessible outside the entrances of the parks. This move comes as the House of Mouse prepares to debut its new Star Wars lands this summer. That's the action from the U.S. market. Back to you in Mumbai.
Well, that was the action from the US markets. On that note, here is some opinion from experts on what they make of the recession fears and rates trajectory in the US.
Yield curve inversion, it's important, but it needs to be taken in context. You know, it's not a binary thing that, okay, the 10-year is 3 basis points below the overnight or the 3-month bill, so therefore in a year we're going to have a recession. Basically, the market's just putting the Fed on notice that it's too tight, and then it's really a response function of when and if the Fed response to that. If the Fed completely ignores it, and while the market is saying it needs to cut 3 times, a year from now, you know, maybe it's a different story. But you know, to Krishna's point, I do think the level of rates is as important as the shape of the curve. If the Fed does end up cutting rates, that's going to give tremendous ammunition to the Chinese government to start stimulating more so than it's been able to do, because it's been stuck with sort of this policy peg to the U.S. and the Chinese currency not being able to go below 7. So if we do end up getting rate cuts in the U.S., there could be a whole other upleg to China and therefore emerging markets. So that could create somewhat of an early cycle type of phenomenon.
All right, and across the Atlantic, European markets, they ended mixed as investors focused more on trade talks as well as developments in the Brexit negotiations. So positive breakthrough or reports of a positive breakthrough in the trade talks did not percolate in terms of gains coming by for the European markets, though Brexit negotiations and the developments out there is something that the street will be watching out for, which is what explains the sort of move that we saw on the FTSE as well. But in the emerging market space, the Brazilian index, that is the one that stands out, has been fairly volatile over the last couple of trading sessions. The previous trading session, it ended with cuts of about 3.7%, And now yesterday, some bit of a pullback that has come by, so a gain of about 2.5% seen on that index. But focus again remains on Brexit. The UK Parliament will hold the watered-down Brexit vote today, which is the third vote on May's deal. Remember, today would have actually been the day the UK left the EU. March 29th was the earlier day. The deputy leader of the Northern Irish Party, propping up Theresa May's government, has indicated that a softer Brexit may be possible. The DUP has said that it will not back May's divorce deal in the third vote.
April the 12th, if we were going to hold European elections, that's the last date at which we can decide whether or not we're going to do them and actually then hold them. So that seems the most likely thing, if we don't get some signs that there is actually a plan B. So the only thing that's useful about today's vote, I mean, this really is a meaningless vote in some senses, because I don't think anybody expects us to pass. Here are your remaining choices. And we've had the 7 votes earlier in the week. None got voted in, but we had a couple of nearlies, and maybe we can return to those and having taken some of the options off the table, get closer to something that people could actually agree on.
Well, the other big story that is being tracked world over is the US-China trade talks currently underway in Beijing. CNBC's Eunice Yoon gets us with the very latest.
The Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer and Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin are preparing for a full day of negotiations after their working dinner with the Chinese Vice Premier yesterday. The Commerce Ministry has said that a lot of work needs to be done, but there have been some reports that have been raising hopes that we could see some compromise. The Wall Street Journal has been reporting that China is willing to make some concessions in its cloud computing industry. It seems pretty limited just by first read. However, under the proposal, foreign tech firms would be allowed to own data centers as part of a pilot in a free trade zone. Also, the Trump administration officials had told Reuters yesterday that the Chinese had put forth proposals on forced technology transfers that had gone further in the past in size and scope. So it looks as though there's some cracks of opening up in the technology sector. Just how significant they are is still to be seen. The Chinese premier, though, was speaking at the Bercow Forum, and he was addressing some of the forced technology transfer issues by putting a timetable on the new foreign investment law, which is meant to address that issue. He said it's going to be in effect as of January 1st. He also said that trade needs to be fair. This is what he said.
China advocates free trade because it is the foundation and precondition for international trade. China also stands for fair trade and has taken concrete actions to uphold fairness and equity.
Premier Li Keqiang there. Trying to send a message out there that that China does indeed address some of the complaints of its trading partners, including the United States.
All right, with that, we move on to the currency space then. The dollar holds steady against a basket of major currencies, while the 10-year US Treasury yields edge up from 15-month lows.
And in the world of commodities then, crude oil rise supported by ongoing supply cuts by OPEC and its allies, as well as US sanctions against Iran and Venezuela.
All right, then with that, we slip into a short break. Come back, we focus on our markets, all the cues and news you need to know for trade this morning.